You're not supposed to be back until Thursday, my mother said, staring at me through the gap in my own front door. She didn't open it wider. She didn't step aside. She just stood there with her hand pressed against the frame like a security guard who had decided I didn't have clearance. Behind her, I could see my sister's husband Marcus sitting at my dining table in a Leafs jersey, eating what looked like my pasta, watching my television. Open the door. Mom, she shifted her weight, blocking the gap a little more. Your sister needed a place. Claire, I told you about the situation with the landlord. Open the door. She stepped out onto the landing instead, pulling it almost shut behind her. The click of the new deadbolt she had installed echoed in the stairwell. My stairwell. In my building. On the 14th floor of the condo I had saved 11 years to buy in downtown Toronto. Diana lost her lease, she said, crossing her arms. Her voice had that particular flatness she used when she had already decided the conversation was over. Marcus got laid off in February. You know that. The landlord gave them 60 days, and they couldn't find anything they could afford. You were in Vancouver for 6 weeks. We thought we had time to explain before you got back. 6 weeks. I repeated. You thought 6 weeks was enough time to move someone into my home without asking me. You have 2 bedrooms. Claire. You live alone. The boys are in the second room. They finally have stability. She tilted her head, deploying the expression I had grown up dreading. The one that said whatever you're feeling right now is a character defect. Diana is your sister. She has 2 kids under 5. What was I supposed to do? Let them sleep at our place. You know your father's back. You know we can't have that chaos. There it was. They could not take the chaos themselves. But they could deposit it directly into my life without a word of warning. I looked past her at the door. The deadbolt she had installed was a physical key model, replacing the smart lock I had put in 18 months ago. She had drilled out my lock. She had actually drilled through the housing of the Schlag smart lock I paid $400 for, and replaced it with a $15 deadbolt from Canadian Tire. Because the smart lock sent alerts to my phone that she knew I could remotely control. She had planned this. I want to be precise about what I was facing, because I know what most people think in this moment. They think call the police. And I want to explain why I stood on that landing and did not immediately dial 911. Because that question matters. I had given my mother a key 18 months ago. For emergencies. She had used that key to let Diana and Marcus in Ontario. The moment someone enters your property with a key given by the owner and begins occupying with the owner's implicit knowledge, removing them is not a police matter. It is a civil matter. I had spoken to a paralegal the previous year about a different situation, and I remembered exactly what she told me. Once occupancy is established, even without a lease, even without payment, the Residential Tenancies Act can apply. If I called police that night, they would take one look at 2 small children, a woman with bags in the closet, and a mother vouching for the arrangement, and they would tell me to speak to a lawyer. They would not remove them. I would have created a scene, given Diana's lawyer ammunition about my behavior, and walked away with nothing except a documented incident where I screamed at my family in a hallway. The police would not save me that night. I needed to think. I need until tomorrow morning, I said. My mother's posture relaxed by degrees. That was the sentence she had been waiting for. The one that meant she had won the first round. Come in and eat. Marcus made enough for everyone. I'm not hungry. I have calls to make. I'll be back in the morning. She nodded, already turning back inside. Already, assuming the rest of the story had been written. Already calculating that I would arrive in the morning with a compromise. Something reasonable. Something that put Diana's needs at the center and asked me to accommodate around the edges, because that was the script I had followed my entire life. I walked to the elevator and went down to the lobby, and sat on the bench by the mailboxes, and stared at the wall of brushed aluminum for a long time. I am 31 years old. I work in municipal infrastructure consulting. I have been told my whole life that I am the practical one. The stable one. The one who has her head on straight. In my family, that has always been a polite way of saying I was the one they could take things from without consequence. Diana was the dreamer. Diana needed support. Diana had the boys. My stability was never celebrated. It was inventoried. I pulled out my phone and texted my manager that I needed a personal day Friday. Then I opened my notes app and started writing. I was back at 9 the next morning with coffee and a folder. My mother opened the door fully this time. She had made herself at home in a way that was almost impressive in its thoroughness. Her reading glasses were on my kitchen counter. Her cardigan was folded over the back of my chair. She had rearranged the kitchen, so her preferred mug was at the front of the cabinet. Diana was on the couch nursing the younger one. She looked at me with an expression that was somewhere between defensive and carefully neutral. Marcus had the older boy on his knee, both of them watching cartoons at a volume that I felt in my sternum. "I've thought about it," I said, setting the coffee on the island. My mother picked hers up. "I knew you'd come around. I have conditions." The room adjusted slightly. Diana lowered the baby from her shoulder. "If you're staying here, I need it to be structured properly. For my insurance, for my taxes, and for the building board." I opened the folder. "I spoke to my accountant this morning. The cleanest arrangement is if Diana takes on the role of property caretaker. It's a formal category under CRA. She goes on my consulting company's payroll as a part-time caretaker. I get a legitimate write-off. She gets T4 income, which actually helps them when they apply for housing again. And most importantly, it gives her access to the company's benefits package." I watched Diana's face. "Benefits," she said. "Extended health. Dental. Vision. Prescription coverage. The package I have through the business. No deductible on the kids' dental." My mother set down her mug. "That's actually very generous." "Claire." It was not generous. It was a mechanism. But I kept my expression helpful and open. "It's just sensible," I said. "The condition is that Diana signs a caretaker services agreement. It's a standard document. Basically says she's responsible for keeping the unit in good condition, reporting maintenance issues, that kind of thing. And it authorizes me to install monitoring equipment in common areas, which my insurance requires for properties under a management arrangement." "Monitoring equipment," Marcus said, without looking away from the television. "Just common areas. Kitchen and living room and hallway. Not bedrooms. It's standard for any caretaker arrangement. My insurance company requires documented oversight." Diana looked at my mother. My mother looked at the folder. I could see her calculating. This was better than she had dared hope for. Not just a roof, but income. Not just shelter, but benefits. She had expected negotiation. She had expected me to make them uncomfortable enough that they would agree to pay minimal rent. This looked like I was rewarding them. "What about the boys' room?" Diana asked. "Stays as is. The arrangement is open-ended as long as the employment relationship is in good standing." That phrase did not register. It should have. But the word benefits had done its work. I printed the agreement from my phone to the portable printer I had brought in my bag. 12 pages. I had drafted it the previous night in my hotel room, at the Marriott on Front Street, working from a template I had purchased from a legal document service, and then modified carefully for 3 hours. The critical architecture was buried in the middle sections, nested inside the benefit eligibility clauses, where eyes naturally slide. Clause 6. 2 housing accommodation is provided exclusively as a condition of active employment, and does not constitute a residential tenancy within the meaning of the Residential Tenancies Act of Ontario. Clause 6. Sen. Termination of the employment relationship, for any reason, results in the immediate revocation of the license to occupy the premises. Clause 9. One employee acknowledges that occupancy is granted as a workplace benefit and not as a tenancy, and waives any claim to tenant protections under provincial legislation. That last clause was the one I had spent the most time on. I had read 3 legal blogs, and 2 forum threads, and 1 actual Ontario case summary, to confirm that a properly structured caretaker arrangement, signed voluntarily, with explicit language, distinguishing it from a tenancy, could in fact insulate the property owner from the RTA. It was not bulletproof, but it was significantly stronger than any position I would have if I simply allowed them to stay informally. The benefits were real. Incidentally, my business did carry a group benefits plan. I had the ability to add a dependent contractor to it. I was not lying about the dental. I was just not mentioning that the employment could be terminated with immediate effect, and that the dental would disappear the same afternoon. I I slid the pages across the island. Diana read the way people read documents. They have already decided to sign. She turned pages in groups, scanning for her name, and the dollar amount, and the benefits paragraph. She paused on page 7. I have to log maintenance hours. It's just for CRA records. Put down 4 hours a week. Checking the furnace filter. Running the dishwasher cycle. Whatever. The paper trail is what matters for the audit. Seems like a lot of paperwork for just staying here. Marcus said, still not looking up. It's a lot of paperwork for free dental. I said. Pleasantly. He had no answer for that. Diana clicked the pen. She signed on the line. She handed it to Marcus, who signed as a witness without reading it at all. My mother stood there, looking like she had personally negotiated a peace treaty. I need to go install the cameras. I said. I have the equipment in my car. It'll take about an hour. We'll stay out of your way. My mother said. I installed 4 cameras. Living room, kitchen, front hallway, and the utility closet, where the building's electrical panel was located. The last one was positioned so that it covered both the closet and the section of hallway outside my bedroom door. All 4 were connected to my home network and streamed to an app on my phone and my laptop. I left at noon. I told them I had a client meeting and would be back that evening. I drove to the Marriott and checked in again, and ordered room service, and opened my laptop. By 2 in the afternoon. I understood exactly what I had walked into. Diana was on the phone in my kitchen, standing at the island where I had been standing 4 hours earlier. I turned up the audio. The camera had a decent built-in microphone, and the kitchen was quiet. She completely caved. Diana was saying. I knew she would. Mom said just give her a night to process and she'll fold. And she did. Honestly, it's better than the old place. The building has a gym. The boys have their own room. And Claire's putting us on her payroll so we get benefits. I don't even have to pay rent. A pause while the other person spoke. No. I know. She thinks she's being clever with all her paperwork, but she's always been like that. She has to feel like she's in control, even when she's doing what you want. Just let her have the clipboard, and she'll give you whatever you ask for. Another pause. Honestly? Mom's right. She has all this money and she never helps anyone. This is just her finally pulling her weight. I sat in the hotel room and ate my chicken sandwich, and did not feel anything in particular. That was the strange part. I had expected to feel hurt. Instead, I felt something much simpler. The way you feel when a long uncertainty is finally resolved. I had spent years wondering if my family's behavior was accidental. If it was pressure and circumstance. If they would be different given stability. Now I knew. This was not circumstance. This was their actual opinion of me, a resource that needed to be managed until it dispensed. I went back to the footage. Over the next 3 days, I watched from the Marriott. Marcus left every morning at 10, and returned smelling like a bar. Though he had told my mother he was looking for work. The older boy, who was 4, had already drawn on the wall beside the hallway closet, with what appeared to be a permanent marker. Diana had moved my furniture to accommodate a gaming setup she and Marcus had brought from their old place. Dragging my dining chairs to make room without putting down the felt pads I kept in the kitchen drawer. There were burn marks on my kitchen island, from Diana, setting a pan directly on the quartz. Twice. On camera. While standing at my stove. On day 2. She smoked on my balcony. My condo building's rules explicitly prohibit smoking on balconies. This is also clearly listed in the caretaker agreement, under property condition obligations. On day 3, Marcus invited 2 of his friends over. They stayed until 1:30 inches the morning. I could hear them through the camera audio clearly enough to log it. I documented every violation with timestamps. I exported the footage. I built a file. On the 4th night, I called my brother-in-law's sister, who had been at my mother's place when this all started, and who I knew had a complicated relationship with Marcus. I asked her, carefully, if Marcus had ever had any legal issues with previous landlords. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I should probably know that Marcus and Diana had left their previous apartment in Mississauga, owing 8 months of rent. The case was in small claims. The landlord had a judgment. I sat with that for a while. Then I opened the background check. I had legally authorized under Clause 11 of the caretaker agreement. which gave me the right to conduct credit and reference checks for insurance and bonding purposes. I had not run it yet. I ran it now. Diana's credit file was a document of slow financial catastrophe. 2 prior evictions noted in collections. A judgment from a previous landlord for $14. 200 inches damages and unpaid rent. Filed 18 months ago. The creditor's firm was a collections and tenancy litigation group, based in Brampton. Their most recent attempted service on Diana had been returned undelivered. Her previous address on file was the Mississauga apartment she had just left. She was not just someone who had lost her housing. She was someone who was hiding from a judgment creditor inside my address. My condo was not a refuge. It was a place to be invisible. I understood now why they had moved so quickly, why my mother had drilled out the smart lock that sent me notifications. They needed her somewhere she could not be found before I found out. And they had needed it to look like an established fact before I got back. I terminated her employment the next morning by email. With a read receipt. At 7:00 a.m. The email was 3 sentences. It cited Clause 6. Sen. It stated that the license to occupy the premises was revoked effective immediately, and requested that she vacate within 24 hours. My phone rang 4 minutes later. "You cannot do this," Diana said. Her voice was doing something between crying and screaming that I recognized from our childhood as a register she used when she felt cornered. "We have rights. You can't just kick us out. We live here. We have kids. There are rules. You signed a caretaker agreement." I said. "Not a lease. You are not a tenant under the RTA. You're a terminated employee whose workplace accommodation has been revoked. That's not legal. That can't be legal. You're welcome to speak to a lawyer. I'd suggest doing it from somewhere other than my condo. Since your 24 hours started 8 minutes ago." She hung up. My mother called 40 seconds after that. "Claire, what you're doing is cruel. Those boys have settled in. You cannot throw children out on the street. I don't care what some paper says. You are their aunt. This is family, Mom," I said. "I know about the judgment from the Brampton landlord. I know about the previous evictions. I know Diana was hiding there, so she couldn't be served. I know you knew this when you moved them in. Silence. You used my home as a place to hide her from a creditor," I said. "That's not a family favor. That's asking me to participate in something I didn't agree to and didn't know about. We're done discussing whether she stays." I hung up. I want to be clear about what happened next. Because I've thought about it a great deal since. I did not do anything dramatic. I did not cut the power or change the locks that afternoon. I waited the full 24 hours. Exactly as the agreement specified. I documented the time. I sent a follow-up email at the 20-hour mark reminding them of the deadline and noting that I had the building superintendent and a licensed paralegal prepared to attend the unit at the deadline if needed. At hour 22. I called the collections firm in Brampton. I told them I had information about the current location of the respondent in their judgment file and asked whether they would like to arrange service. They would. I gave them my address and the time frame. At hour 23 and 40 minutes. A process server arrived at the 14th floor. I watched on the camera feed from my hotel room as the knock came at my door. I watched Diana look through the peephole and freeze. I watched her turn to Marcus and say something I couldn't fully hear. I watched Marcus grab the gaming console. I watched Diana pick up the baby and take the older boy by the hand. They were out within 20 minutes. They left a great deal behind. Dishes in the sink. Laundry in my washer. The gaming setup in pieces in my dining room. A bag of Marcus's things behind the couch. But they were out. And the door was closed. And when I checked the camera feed, the hallway was empty. I drove back to my building. I let myself in with the code I had set before I left for Vancouver. The one I had never given anyone. The one only I knew. The deadbolt my mother had installed. I had a locksmith remove that afternoon. My smart lock went back on the door the following morning. I walked through the condo. It looked the way places look when people leave fast. With the particular disorder of urgency, rather than ordinary living. The permanent marker on the hallway wall. The quartz burns. The furniture not quite where it had been. But they were my walls and my floors and my furniture. And I walked through the rooms in the quiet of a Thursday evening in October, and I felt something I hadn't felt in over a week. Space. The cleaning company came the next morning. The wall took 2 rounds of a stain-blocking primer before the marker stopped bleeding through. The quartz company assessed the burns and quoted me for a section repair. I filed an insurance claim for the smart lock replacement and the property damage, which the caretaker agreement supported, because Diana had been an authorized occupant under a documented arrangement, not an unauthorized intruder, which meant I had the right paper trail for a civil claim if I chose to pursue it. I have not spoken to my mother since. She has called 6 times. She sent 2 texts. The most recent one said that I had broken the family, and she hoped I was proud of myself. I read it on my couch on a Saturday morning, with coffee, in the room where my furniture was back in its original place. Diana is facing both a collections judgment and a new one, pending for the property damage. The process server delivered the papers successfully. She and Marcus are staying with Marcus's parents in Barrie. I don't know what they'll do after that. And I have made peace with not knowing. My mother asked, in one of the voicemails, how I could be so cold. How I could treat family this way. How I could sleep at night. I sleep fine. Here is what I have understood. Slowly. Over the past several weeks, there is a particular kind of cruelty that presents itself as virtue. It says, look at how much this person needs. Look at how little you sacrifice to give it. Look at how selfish you are for counting the cost. It uses your love as the leverage, and your sense of fairness as the mechanism, and it makes you feel that any boundary you maintain is a moral failure. I spent a long time believing that the measure of how much I loved my family was how much I was willing to absorb. I don't believe that anymore. Love does not mean unlimited access. Love does not mean I owe you my home when you have burned through your own. Love does not mean you get to decide what I can afford to lose and then lose it on my behalf without asking. I bought this condo with 11 years of weekend work and skipped vacations and a level of financial discipline that my family found baffling, and I now understand. Slightly insulting. Because my success was never something they celebrated. It was something they waited for. They were not proud of me. They were patient. The distinction matters. I had a friend over for dinner last week. We sat at my table, the one Marcus had pushed against the wall to make room for his setup, which is now exactly where I put it when I moved in. We drank wine and talked until midnight, and I walked her to the elevator and came back inside and stood in the quiet of my own kitchen. This is what I worked for, not the square footage or the 14th floor view or the address. The quiet. The ordinary, unremarkable quiet of a place that is mine and only mine, and that does not exist to be a resource for anyone else. If there is something I want you to take from this, it is not that you should be ruthless with people who need help. It is that need is not the same as entitlement. That someone being in a bad situation does not mean you caused it. That the most important thing I did was not the caretaker agreement, or the cameras, or the phone call to the process server. The most important thing I did was stop treating their discomfort as my responsibility. The night I sat in the Marriott and heard my sister say she never helps anyone, I could have felt devastated. I had expected to. Instead, I felt something closer to relief. Because if that is who I am to them after everything, then there is nothing I can do or give or sacrifice that will change it. You cannot earn your way into being seen correctly by people who have already decided what you are. So you stop trying. You revoke the license. You change the code. And in the morning, when the cleaning company has come and gone, and the furniture is back where it belongs, you make yourself coffee, and you stand in your own kitchen, and you understand that the most complete freedom is not the absence of conflict. It is the absence of people who require you to make yourself smaller to justify your existence. That is the only thing worth protecting.